Welcome to the Sacramento County Child Protective Services Policy and Procedure Training on Screening and Processing of Reports Made to Emergency Response Intake. The purpose of this policy and procedure is to detail the requirements for screening and processing reports of suspected child abuse and neglect received by the Child Protective Services Hotline. It is the department's policy that ER intake social workers shall screen and process reports of suspected child abuse and neglect received by telephone, in writing, or in person, and assess whether the alleged abuse or neglect meets the criteria for an in-person CPS response using the Structured Decision Making, also known as SDM, hotline tools as a guideline. ER intake social workers shall utilize solution-focused questions to elicit the information necessary to determine whether an in-person response is required and the time frame for those responses. The following information shall be obtained when a report of child abuse, neglect, or exploitation is received: demographic information about the parents, children, household members, and any other adult having significant in-home contact with the child, including, but not limited to, names, ages, dates of birth, gender, ethnicity, ICWR inquiry, languages, school and daycare information, current address, and location of the children. Please note, per the Welfare and Institutions Code Section 224.2, Section A, the duty to inquire about if a child is or may be an Indian child begins with the initial contact, including, but not limited to, asking the party reporting child abuse or neglect whether he or she has any information that the child may be an Indian child. Staff should also obtain the following: the reporter's allegations or concerns and the details to include who, what, when, and where, and the family's strengths and or acts of protection or services being provided to the family. Please note, utilize additional resources and tools as needed to verify and or obtain demographic information, such as household members, addresses, custody arrangements, and criminal information. Available resources and tools may include, but are not limited to, CalWIN, child support databases, Sacramento County Sheriff's Department Inmate Locator, Sacramento Superior Court website, and the County Parcel Viewer. Referral document. A referral document is created in CWS CMS for every report of suspected child abuse and neglect received using the referral document template in the screener narrative section of CWS CMS. The ER intake social worker shall create the referral document in CWS CMS by completing the following tasks: naming the referral utilizing the naming convention table. Please see the intake desk reference. Developing a provisional harm statement based on whom the reporter identified as the alleged perpetrator, what the perpetrator did to the child or what the perpetrator failed to do for the child, and the impact of the perpetrator's actions or inactions on the child. Documenting the who, what, where, and when details of the reporter's concerns, entering all applicable special projects codes, and entering the date of occurrence in the occurrence information field of CWS CMS. Response time assessment. The ER intake social worker shall assess whether the alleged abuse or neglect meets the criteria for an in-person response, an evaluate out, which is no response, or a community referral guided by the SDM hotline tool. Sacramento County uses the following response times. Immediate response, also known as an IR, is an in-person contact within 24 hours of the referral being received. A 10-day response is an in-person contact within 10 days of the referral being received. Day 1 is the day the referral was created. Evaluate out. This is where an in-person contact is not required. We will be discussing evaluating out referrals in another section of this policy. An NA secondary. In-person investigation is not required due to identical allegations received in an existing open referral that was created within 30 days. Response time assessment continued. If the alleged abuse and or neglect requires an in-person response, The ER intake social worker shall determine if the response time shall be an immediate response or a 10-day response. To assist with determination of the response time, the ER intake social worker shall assess information gathered from the reporter and complete the following tasks. Contact any collaterals if necessary to clarify or obtain additional information. Collaterals can include, but are not limited to, law enforcement, public health nurses, or other CPS staff. They will need to complete the SDM hotline tools and use the SDM definitions to assist with screening decisions and response times. They will need to consult with an intake supervisor as needed. And they will also need to make necessary cross reports, including, but not limited to, law enforcement, community care licensing, CPS quality of care, and the district attorney's office. Please see the law enforcement cross report chart included in the intake desk reference. Please note, if the report indicates a special circumstance and/or special handling, please refer to the intake desk reference. Referral documentation timelines. Referral documentation shall be completed within the following timelines. IR referrals shall be completed immediately prior to the ER intake social worker taking any other actions unless supervisory approval is obtained. 10-day referrals shall be completed no later than the end of the ER intake social worker's shift. Evaluate out referrals shall be completed within 24 hours of receipt of the report. NA secondary referrals shall be completed within 24 hours of receipt of the report. Please note, if referral documentation cannot be completed within the timelines, the intake social worker must consult with an ER intake supervisor. Mandated reporters. Mandated reporters are required to complete the Suspected Child Abuse Report, also known as the SCAR, which is Form SS-8572, within 36 hours of reporting child abuse or neglect, per Penal Code Section 11166. ER intake social workers shall provide mandated reporters with the following options for submitting the SCAR. They can submit it online at www.dcfas.saccounty.net/CPS. The code is 34 and the corresponding month. For example, 3401 would be used for January, 3402 would be used for February. They can fax it to 916-874-4002. They can email it to 11166@saccounty.net, or they can mail it to County of Sacramento, DCFAS, P.O. Box 269057, Sacramento, California 95826. The SCAR form, also known as the SS-8572. Upon receipt of the SCAR forms, ER intake social workers shall complete the following tasks. Review the SCAR to ensure all pertinent information and allegations are included in the referral documentation. Record the date of the SCAR in the Reporter tab of CWS CMS. CPS hotline requests for resources and referrals. The CPS hotline also receives calls requesting referrals to resources and other agencies where there is no abuse and/or neglect being alleged by the reporter. These types of calls do not fall within the purview of CPS to investigate. The call is not recorded as a referral, an incident of alleged abuse or neglect, but is screened and referred to other agencies for potential services. In these situations, after the requested information is provided, the call is screened as information and referral, I&R, in CWS. Examples include a caller who wants to know the name and address to family court, the name of resources for single-parent support groups, and counseling resources available in the community. Please note, please refer to the intake desk reference regarding the process for documenting I&R calls in CWS. Evaluating out referrals. Referrals that are assessed to not meet the criteria for an in-person response can be evaluated out under one or more of the following rationales. A. Unable to locate child or family. B. The allegations do not meet the definitions of child abuse, exploitation, or neglect contained in the CDSS Manual of Policies and Procedures. C. The alleged perpetrator is not a caretaker, relative, or in the home, and the caretaker is able and willing to protect. and/or another child protective agency has adequately addressed the allegation and protection of the child, which is called a third party. D. The allegation does not indicate specific acts or behaviors which would be suggestive of abuse, neglect, or exploitation. E. Additional information from collateral contacts or records review is obtained which invalidates the reported allegation. And F. The same allegations regarding the same incidents have previously been or is currently being investigated, and the current referral offers no new information, and the intake social worker has reviewed the prior investigations and determined that there is no new information. ER intake social worker responsibilities. The ER intake social worker shall complete the following tasks when the referral is completed: review for accurate and complete documentation, enter applicable special project codes in CWS-CMS, check that the date of occurrence is entered into the occurrence information field of CWS, ensure that all needed collaterals have been completed, complete the structured decision-making hotline tool, make sure the necessary cross-reports were made and documented in CWS, and submit the referral to the intake supervisor for review and approval. The ER intake supervisor's responsibilities. ER intake supervisors shall complete the following tasks when referrals are submitted for review and approval: review for accurate and complete documentation, verify applicable special projects codes were entered into CWS-CMS, check that the date of occurrence is entered into the occurrence information field of CWS, ensure that all needed collaterals have been completed, confirm the structured decision-making hotline tool was completed correctly, and make sure the necessary cross-reports were made and documented in CWS-CMS. Here is a list of related documents that were mentioned in this policy: the intake desk reference, the CSEC allegations and hotline screening tools, the naming convention table, and ACL 17-91, which is the clarification on documenting calls to the Child Welfare Hotline that do not require an in-person response investigation. Here's a list of related policies and procedures: the SDM Decision-Making Assessment Tools Expectations Policy and Procedure, as well as the ER Intake Social Worker Standards. Here's a list of definitions that we discussed today in this policy. Contact information. Please email CPS Policy and Procedure at sackcounty.net and include screening and processing of reports made to emergency response intake in the subject line if there are any questions or concerns. Thank you so much and have a great day.